Hello, 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 ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX World. I'm your host, as always, Kane Sims. And today we've got a delightful podcast coming up for you today. I'm just going to get rid of this cable. Where we're going to be talking to Steven Siddall, who is the contact systems lead at M&S, Marks and Spencer's. For those of you that don't know, Marks and Spencer's is one of the UK's largest retailers, has been using conversational AI for quite some time in a bunch of different channels. And we're going to be climbing into exactly how it's used, what the lessons have been from Steven and his team, and how you can apply the same lessons to improve your conversational AI initiatives. But before we do that, I'd like to give a shout out to Deepgram. Deepgram is industry-leading speech recognition technology. Companies up and down the world and all over the place are using Deepgram's industry-proven automatic speech recognition to power conversational AI, voice bots, and a whole manner of other transcription requirements, from call recordings and transcriptions to meetings and transcribing meetings and assigning actions to people automatically, and a whole bunch of other things can be enabled further down the pipeline. But it all starts with getting an accurate transcription, especially when you're working with voice assistant technologies. Most organizations don't even retrain their speech recognition models, and they wonder why their bot's not performing as good as it could. And so with Deepgram, you can retrain your models based on your specific industry domain, based on the way that your customers speak, based on your products and services. The accuracy is immense. It's incredibly cost effective. The speed is unbelievable as well. So do check out deepgram.com/VUX World if you do have some speech recognition or ASR requirements. That is deepgram.com/VUX World. Shout out to Deepgram. Okay, so without further ado, let's welcome today's guest, Steven Siddall of Marks and Spencer's. Steve, welcome.
Okay, nice to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. How's things?
Good, thank you. Yeah, busy as always. But
Yeah,
that's where we like it.
no rest for the wicked, as they say.
No.
Well, thanks for joining us. I appreciate you joining us. I know that you're busy, and I know that you've got a whole load of stuff on your plate, especially when it comes to the conversational AI side of things. A lot of stuff going on at M&S, a lot of plates spinning and stuff like that. But I'm definitely excited to share with the audience today a little bit about what you're up to and stuff. So maybe to kick it off, be good to maybe introduce yourself, and for those who are maybe a bit further afield, might not be aware of Marks and Spencer in the US and broadly in other parts of Europe and whatnot. Might be interesting also to just introduce M&S at the same time.
Yeah, sure. So just a bit about M&S first. So if you're unfamiliar with M&S, so M&S has been around for a long time in the UK, since the sort of late 1800s, and we started as a sort of a penny bazaar in Leeds Market, and grown from there really. And we've got a long tradition of in the UK of being synonymous with quality, innovation, and we operate sort of in a number of international markets as well. But broadly, we're in the sort of retail space, clothing, home, food, all that good stuff that everyone likes, really. There's an interesting story on the website of our history about we were one of the first retailers to sell avocado pears in the UK. And there's a story, I don't know if it's true or not, but there's a story of a customer who tried to serve this avocado pear with custard. Quite interesting. Well, I was having a look before this. There's quite a lot of recipes now for avocado pears with custard on the internet. So
Really?
yeah.
Avocado pears. Are you talking about two avocados or a certain type of avocado pear?
No, an avocado pear, as in the stuff you make guacamole for.
All right. Wow. Interesting. Avocado with custard. I don't know if I would. Mind you, banana and custard go as well. So things
That's the thing, yeah. So it's interesting, but yeah, that's sort of a bit about M&S really. So a bit about myself. So I've worked in contact centers for about 30 years now in a variety of different sort of organizations. I've worked embedded in the operation. I've worked for third-party suppliers. I've worked for outsourced contact center operations. But all broadly always in the field of sort of the systems that sit around contact centers that are used to sort of make contact centers work. I've been with M&S about 6 years, and about 4 years ago is sort of where we sort of started our conversational AI journey. But I've been exposed to it on and off, in my career, before it was even known as conversational AI, in the days where to be able to leverage speech, you had to be able to code.
Voice XML and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting. So where did your first kind of exposure or interest come from in this field then?
Insofar as M&S goes, so we've sort of had we started, so I guess, with the nuanced chatbot um, about 5 years or so ago, and that sort of evolved over time, and that was sort of very much in the chat arena. About sort of 2 or 3 years ago, we started on our voice journey, and that was for a very, very specific use case to do with our store estate, where we believe there was an opportunity in the way that we set up our stores. So that historically, what happened is you rang an M&S store, you sort of went through to one of 13 sort of centralized switchboards, and that was sort of a little room in a number of stores across the UK, where someone would answer your call and ask you what you wanted what you were trying to do, and they would take that information and then, broadly speaking, always just transferred you on manual transfer to the right area of M&S. That might be within the store, it might be to the contact center operation, or it might even be to a third party. And that was sort of looked at, we sort of felt that there was an opportunity there to sort of go, okay, well, could we take that switchboard operation and turn that into an automated way of where someone could actually say what it was that they wanted to do, and then we would transfer that call to the right place. And that's sort of where we started on our I guess, our natural language voice journey, as it were.
Interesting. And what was the kind of motive behind that? Was it that you had lots of these switchboards dotted around all over the place and the experience was a bit inconsistent? Like, what was or was
Yeah,
it an
yeah.
innovation play? Like, what was the kind of motive?
There was a lot of things driving it, a lot of benefits that we built into the business case. And some of it was about, okay, well, some of it was about leverage. Was the destination we were sending that call to, that contact to, the best place to service it? So we always had that sort of customer service element in there, and consistency is obviously quite important about that. Anyone who sort of works in contact centers is aware that when you're trying to sort of work with people, sometimes there's a lot of processes that sit around sort of seeing what those colleagues are doing, measuring their effectiveness. You're always sort of looking at colleague transfers in a contact center, and we felt that having a bot doing that for us was a way of both consistently and efficiently sort of getting that done, really. And that was sort of a bit of a gateway then to was there other ways then that we could then improve the customer journey by trying to automate those conversations a little bit more, and getting the customer the information that they needed a little bit earlier.
Beginner's mistake, mic on mute. Interesting. So let's well, maybe we'll come back onto that. But you mentioned as well you had a chatbot also.
Yeah.
So you had the IVR journey began with call routing and kind of enhancing or augmenting the switchboard.
Yeah.
Where did the chatbot kind of situation begin?
Yeah, so that was sort of an opportunity that was identified, relating to our e-commerce site. So probably going back to the sort of the history of M&S. History of M&S sort of, is very much bricks and mortar retail in the UK. 600 or so stores in the UK, and that was our primary sort of point of sale. Now, around sort of 10 years ago, we started moving into this, into the e-commerce space, and got a website, and part of the future strategy of M&S is sort of digital first. Not to say that stores are always going to be, not going to be always a part of M&S, but what we felt there was that there was a lot of stuff going on the website where customers were trying to find answers to questions, and we could, traditionally, if you look at the most website, we've got help pages, we've got contact us forms for email, we've got telephone numbers if you want to ring us and stuff like that. And what we felt was that there was a gap there, that we felt that we had a number of live chat journeys that basically came from our contact us forms directly into a colleague. And what we then wanted to do was to sort of see what we could then do with a chat bot to see if we could then service those customers, get them again, get them answers to questions, a bit sooner. Really try to start to understand, well, what are these customers actually what are these customers trying to find on the website? Is there an opportunity to sort of help with the selling journey, answer a question? But that's sort of where that came from. It was sort of, partly to sort of, can we service those contacts better, and can we leverage further opportunity in terms of what customers are looking at on the website.
Interesting. And did you find that there was a bunch of untapped demand there when you launched that chatbot initially?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. It's sort of a, when you start offering chat on the website, you don't know whether you're actually generating more contacts than you would do before, or are you actually deflecting contacts from customers who are going to call you anyway, or customers who are going to email you anyway. So that's quite interesting, and still is interesting in terms of to sort of really understand where those pain points are in the e-commerce journey, and where we can then introduce a proactive assisted offering. A good example of that one of the first journeys that we did with the chatbot was where customers were at the point in the journey where they were trying to add a promo code to a particular basket, and some customers were struggling, and then having to contact the contact center, or go to a live agent to try and assist them there. And that remains to the day to be one of the most effective automated journeys that we've got. So what we do is we intervene in that now based upon where we see behavior to sort of say, if a customer enters a promo code and it's refused, we offer then, that's where we intervene with the chat journey, and sort of what the bot does, it first tries to sort of offer you some easy fault finding, what might be going wrong, have you tried this, have you tried that? And then obviously if that automated journey isn't able to solve that for the customer, obviously we still give the option to sort of speak to a live colleague in the contact center. But that remains to the day to be one of our more successful journeys.
Interesting. So you're essentially proactively recognizing through on-page behavior when someone might be struggling, and then you'll just pop up the chatbot at the right time to say, "Hey, is this something you're trying to do?" Is that right?
Yeah, that's basically what we're trying to, and that's probably more of what we want to be doing in the future. If you look at what we do on the website today, it's sort of very much most journeys are sort of a blanket offering. So we sort of just go, okay, if you need help, we've got a chatbot here that might be able to help you. And on typical pages like our help pages, on our contact us pages. But what we want to start doing is more of that style of proactively intervening in the journey based upon what it is you are doing on the website, and where we see issues occurring. And equally, what we know about you, if you're logged into the website, if, for example, you've got a certain product in your basket, or you've been browsing certain pages, we'll leverage that information then to put you in touch with, first of all, we'll see if we can help with the chatbot, but then because we understand what it is that you're actually trying to do, we can put you then in touch with a more specialist, expert in that particular field. Say, for example, if you've got a furniture item in your basket, for example, you've been browsing the furniture pages, and you may have been looking at, product dimensions and stuff like that. That's where we may leverage that information to sort of put you in touch with a furniture expert. And sometimes that might be in one of our stores.
Interesting. That's a really good example of how, because I think what most people do when they create a chatbot is they begin with the kind of use case that you alluded to there, which is the "Hi, how might I help you?" situation. And what I think a lot of organizations fail to do is use the data that you already have. I mean, here you're talking predominantly about website behavioral data, whereas it could just as well be CRM data. The customer's logged in, what the last purchase was, they've returned to the website 5 days later. Has it been delivered? Yes, it has. Are they talking about returns or complaints? And using the data that you know already to start being proactive and guiding or preempting that conversation rather than always beginning from hi, how are you kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, and that sort of, that and I guess, so we've very much focused on the servicing, when stuff perhaps isn't working as well as we'd like it to. We feel there's an untapped area of more, let's say, more proactive style journeys in terms of, where we can potentially add more value by helping someone to try and find what it is that they're looking to buy, to purchase, for example. So, where we're sort of leveraging the technology then for more of that type of journey, the value add journey, as opposed to helping when something hasn't worked quite as well as it should have done.
Yeah, definitely. Coming kind of forward in the customer journey to try and assist with the sales and the research and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but again, it's what you can do with you can do some simple stuff with, like you say, a blanket offering, but where the real value is sort of utilizing that other stuff about that as that person or what's actually going on the journey, within the journey itself.
Yeah, definitely. What kind of, so you mentioned the chatbot there started as a way of handling some customer support and stuff like that. What is the how are you kind of measuring that? Because you mentioned there that it's quite difficult to determine whether the chatbot does prevent kind of website traffic from
Yeah.
hitting the call center and stuff like that. How are you approaching figuring out how the chatbot's performing?
Yeah, so what we try and do, and there's a lot of tools out there that can do this, I guess that digital insights type piece. And there's a lot of website analytics programs available for that. But our vision around this, I guess, is sort of more around, okay, well, once you can sort of understand where those journeys are going wrong, do you then have the ability to intervene in those journeys based upon what you understand, where you can sort of go, well, I'm going to intervene in this journey, but I'm not going to intervene in that journey because it doesn't quite meet the criteria. So what we do is we look at sort of behavioral stuff on the website to sort of go, okay, well, where are customers reaching a contact journey, for example? So, they're coming into an email, so they're emailing us. So can we trace that customer's journey back up the funnel to sort of understand, okay, so this customer here, they came into an email, they actually emailed us, but where did they start? Why are they emailing us? And obviously you can sort of understand that from the intent of the email, the subject matter, what's in there. But then you have to combine that information with what you know about that journey that particular person took to get to that journey. And the same applies for voice, the same applies for chat. And that's where, we sort of got a good understanding of what's going on around the help pages, but where we want to grow that level of understanding is what did they do before they got to the help page? And then did that trigger of contact start outside of the website? So for example, as with any sort of e-commerce retail, where's my order is obviously a huge driver for contacts in our operations. And that trigger for that customer to contact us probably doesn't happen on the website because they bought the product 2 or 3 days ago or some weeks ago. So everything up to that point went well. They didn't have to contact us. But where they have to then decide to make a contact to us because they're waiting for the order, it's not arrived on time, then we need to be able to leverage that information when that customer is coming into that where's my order journey, so that we can sort of go, and that's where you can start to do some really clever stuff. If you've identified that person, you can sort of leverage that to change either the offer or what you're actually saying to the person. So for example, if we know that you have ordered something and we can see it's not, it was meant to be delivered, at a certain time, certain day, we see you coming into that journey, can we then leverage that information to sort of give you a more tailored start to that conversation to sort of go, hi Steve, we can see you've ordered this product with us. Are you contacting us to sort of find out where this is? Where we can sort of start to really then so the customer doesn't have to tell us. We're sort of trying to inform them about what we think is most likely they're going to be contacting us about, and similar stuff. Maybe stuff that's going on in stores as well. Where a customer might have purchased something in store.
Interesting. We had a conversation with Kishore Reddy from CTO of Yellow AI, and he was talking about a use case where it's almost like the reverse or the back end of what you've discussed there. So rather than somebody coming onto the website, you've already got some information about them. You can preempt what their query might be about and then deliver that proactive kind of interaction. He was talking about a situation where the kind of customer is engaging with a chatbot, then decides to drop out for whatever reason, and then using that kind of data, is that at the right place to drop out? Did they get to the end of the conversation? And if not, triggering like a follow-up SMS text that says, "Oh, we know you got to here. Do you want to continue the conversation here?"
Yeah.
And so it kind of got me thinking a little bit about using other modalities and other channels to your advantage. And as you were kind of explaining there, someone makes an order, takes maybe the delivery's late or whatever. The chatbot needs to understand where to go to look for the information that says it's late and what the new expected delivery date is. So I suppose there's a question around, is there a time when you think that other channels may be used to support that chatbot? Because, for example, there's no reason why that couldn't be a proactive text message that says, "Hey, sorry, we know your package is delayed. It's going to be arriving within the next X days." Like, how is your thoughts thinking around the usage of other channels in that kind of omni-channel automation journey?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely feel that like more proactive journey generation is definitely going to play a part, in our strategy. So that sort of, M&S obviously is doing a lot of the standard stuff to sort of go, your order's not going to arrive on time and stuff like that in conjunction with our delivery partners. But then, one thing that we think there's an opportunity there, but we need to do a lot of work to sort of understand it more is, would a better journey then be inviting that customer into a conversation with either a colleague or some sort of bot to sort of help them, should they choose to reach out with that, as opposed to sort of leaving it very open to sort of go, well, we've let you know that there's a problem, but we've not sort of given you we've not suggested the way that we might want you to get in touch with us, if you see what I mean. So you leave it open to a customer that they'll choose whatever suits them, which might not be the best way to service them from their perspective, and it also might not suit M&S as a business. We might want to direct certain customers to a particular channel. It's also to do with the time of day as well. Some of the stuff that we're looking at in terms of not specifically, with conversational AI, but where if you look at contact us options on the website, what we want to do is sort of offer the best way of contacting us, dependent on actually what's going on in the contact center right now. So if we know, wait times on voice are 3-4 minutes or so, but we know chat's quiet, we then leverage that information to then offer, the most offer a different contact option dependent on what it is you want to contact us about. For example, we still got a lot of customers who get in touch with us about where's my order via email. But email, obviously, because of its nature, it tends to be, it's going to be, sometimes up to 24 hours before we get back to you. So would a better journey to be offer a where's my order intent, would that be better sent into a real-time channel, because then we can actually give you the information in real time? Because quite often, by the time we get to an email saying where's my order, the order might have been delivered anyway.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. There's some to be said maybe for automating emails using some NLU solutions, but the challenge is that they tend to drone on a little bit, so you need to do a lot of work in trying to realize which part of the email is important. But But yeah, that makes total sense. So in to wrap up on the chatbot side of things, it sounds as though it's definitely solving a real problem around the Q&A and that kind of stuff. I think you mentioned that it's starting to get into transactional use cases here and there. You're working on making it more proactive and stuff like that. What's the kind of impact being on the business from having that chatbot in place? Like, how does the business determine whether it's working?
Yeah, so we've got a number of measures, and these are sort of continually evolving. So interestingly enough, we in the last year we sort of moved away from the nuanced chatbot
Right.
to a different bot. And that's that's got some that's allowed us to achieve a better sort of service rate, I guess,
Hmm.
successfully service rate. But I think probably what over time we've sort of evolved this, so when we started with this, we looked at it very simplistically, as in, well, if you've not escalated out of the bot, clearly your problem's been sorted.
Mm.
Whereas it's not quite that it's not quite that clear cut. So you can't just look at transfer rates to escalations to colleagues. Um, so what we might then do, what we then do is we sort of look at other things that indicate that. So for example, we'll ask a question at the end of that bot conversation, just as we do with a colleague, but we ask different questions. So for example, for our chatbot, we sort of ask, well, did we answer your question? As opposed to a colleague post interaction survey would be more around, obviously you've got your traditional NPS, you got your brand, and you've got we have colleague NPS as well.
Hmm.
But we use that in conjunction with, okay, well, this is the transfer rate out of that particular journey. But what are these other things that are saying that they're saying, what proportion of customers in that journey are saying you've actually answered my question? Because quite sometimes what you can get is that frustration with the journey. So a customer just gives up on the conversation because they feel it's not working for them, and then they might appear then in another contact channel. So what we've started to do now is sort of look at those. Okay, well, I've reached out I've reached out in the chat bot or the voice bot, for example. It appears that we've answered your question because you've chosen to sort of hang up that journey, or you've gone away. But then do we see you appear in another contact channel, such as email, within a certain space of time? And then this allows us then to sort of get a more rounded view of just because it's not been transferred doesn't mean that we've actually answered your question, and started to look more about how you feel about that conversation as well. So looking at the conversation itself and looking for sentiment. What's the sentiment off the back of that conversation? And we might be looking for frustration in that conversation, and all these factors then sort of need to be looked at in the round to sort of then judge how well that conversation is going from a customer perspective,
Mm.
as well as combining it with what we're trying to achieve from a business perspective.
Nice, interesting. So on the voice side of things, then, so you mentioned that that project started from looking at how to kind of augment the switchboard and how to make routing calls more effective and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. I wonder if you can kind of walk us through that journey. Like, so you've identified a problem that there's I don't know, maybe customers are getting either sent to the wrong places, or it's taking up a lot of resource to try and manage these calls. It's adding a lot of kind of time onto an average call time, etc., etc. Where did you start with how to approach that kind of particular part?
Yeah, so it's worth calling out that this was it's a big project in M&S, and I was a part of the project, but it was a whole cross-functional team that were involved in that. You've got domain experts who know about customer,
Mhm.
you've got people who know about how the switchboard work. Then you've got technical resource, development teams, and initially this was sort of the problem statement was sort of built collaboratively, between the business problem and then the true technical people sort of went out and looked to see, okay, we think this is possible. We've got a hypothesis to sort of say we can replicate this, we can build this using technology and automate this routing journey based upon what it is you're trying to do as a customer in the voice channel. And a lot of different products were looked at, using a lot of different, you sort of got your, you've got your more managed service style of approaches versus, you sort of citizen developer type solutions, and there was a lot of work first spent, looking at that and what would be the best, the best thing for our particular use cases. One of the most important things for us as I guess the contact center operations is that we needed to retain quite a lot of control and flexibility in terms of, once we deliver this, we have to be able to sort of administer it ourselves and make changes to it quite often, at short notice, depending on what's happening within a particular store, within a particular, contact reason, as it were. So that was all sort of played into that, and eventually we sort of settled on a sort of a Twilio Google Dialogflow solution. And at the time, Google Dialogflow was primarily a chat. Historically, I think it had been used primarily as a chat feature, and using sort of what Twilio were doing, and the ability to sort of pick and choose from the sweet shop to sort of go, okay, well, we'll use Dialogflow, we'll use speech to text from here, we'll use text to speech from here. We sort of built that as a platform, as a platform concept, and then had using our integration partners, we built interfaces then that business users, operational business users could use to administer the platform and give us that flexibility we still needed, which was incredibly valuable, during the past, obviously what the world's been through in the past couple of years or so. And then, we had a very clear plan as to how we would approach that, and that was very much formed. First of all, we'll do intent capture. So we'll simply start asking a select group of people who were a select group of stores were placed on this, and so we just started asking the questions. Tell us why you're calling. And interestingly enough, there was a lot of we did experiment a little bit with what question we're going to ask, in that journey. So we went through. One of the things we tried an experiment with was we asked. We started asking what initially, one of the experiments was that we'd ask, tell us what it is you want to do today. And interestingly enough, and I don't think sure if this is just to do with the UK, we were getting some interesting answers off the back of that, based upon the British sense of humour, perhaps. We saw a few swim with dolphins, and that was one of the things that we got in there. We felt that tell us why you're calling. Why you're calling us today was a better fit, and that's still the question we use today. And then off the back of that, we simply started capturing that, and not doing anything with it at first. So we just thank the caller, and then that call would be sent through to, instead of sending it through to these regional switchboard hubs, we'd sent it through to sort of more contact center type area. And they then would perform the same thing as what the store switchboard was doing, but also what they'd start to do is they'd start then to try and add value to that call. So, for example, one of the things that we used to get a lot of was people ringing a store asking if a particular item was in stock in a particular color or a particular size, and asking the store to put it aside for them because they were going to be down later. And that was one of the scenarios where we felt that that would be better serviced by sending that through to the contact center, where we could then source that product from basically we could look for that product that the customer wanted across all our store estate and from our e-commerce side of things. And that way we sort of then providing a better service, if you see what I mean, because we're more like, because quite a lot of that time, you go through to the store and they wouldn't have it, so what would you do? So that was where we started then to leverage a little bit of value, understand a little bit more about the call types, because prior to sort of getting the intent model in place, we didn't really know what all these reasons were. It was very much the old 5-bar gate type approach. And even insofar as, we didn't actually know a lot about how many calls we were handling within, from this route. And by starting sort of with that basic intent model, we then took all those utterances, built an intent model off the back of that. And then we started to tune and check for accuracy on that model with your traditional sort of approach that you would take, where you'd sort of go, okay, well, let's go and, they've said this, we've matched it to this intent. Did they say this, first of all, the usual tuning activity, and then checking for accuracy to sort of, once we then started allocating those utterances to the intents that we believe they're associated with them, checking that was all working. And we sort of set ourselves a standard, we weren't going to start doing anything with that particular call, with that particular intent that was different, until we got it to at least sort of 80% accuracy. And today our model is sort of, that's still sort of the minimum benchmark, but most of our intents are sort of in the sort of mid 90s in terms of accuracy of utterance to intent allocation. So we then sort of had our basic intent model. We then rolled that across the entire store estate instead of sort of the select group of stores we were using off the back of that. And then we started to look for opportunities to then actually service the customer's questions. So, for example, if someone was ringing up regarding store, stock availability in store, we'd send that through to the contact center, because that's a sort of a sales opportunity, a value add opportunity. If you were ringing regarding store opening hours, we then sent you through to an automated IVR, where, because we knew which store you'd called, we could give you the store opening hours, and we all started to automate those. And some journeys still today are, where we're giving you the information we think might answer your question you might have, but we feel there's still a huge untapped resource in terms of further opportunities to service that contact. Basically, if it's not just generic information we're trying to give you, we actually want to try and automate the contact, if you see what I mean. So, for example, if you want to track your order, we provide an interface in there, and then we're just sort of growing those journeys over time, to then leverage, leverage greater efficiency within those contact types. But again, still giving the customer the option to speak to a colleague if we've not been able to answer your question.
Nice. That's pretty good practice, and is a really solid approach. That starting with just generally capturing utterances that you don't already have, building an intent model around that, and then looking for how to service it, basically. And then once you've got that up and running, you're then just kind of looking at long tail things or seasonal things, that come and go, here and there. How was the kind of process around the kind of gradual implementations? Because some organizational cultures have a kind of culture which is very much about the kind of big bang approach, spend months and all kinds of stuff developing it, then big bang launch. Other companies have that more of an agile culture, whereby they're more interested and up for doing a more incremental rollout. With conversational AI, it's very difficult to do a big bang approach, because especially if you're starting cold with no data whatsoever, you need to do an exercise to gather that training data, be it through call recordings or, as you've done, or like launching it and capturing live data. And then you need to then prioritize that, don't you? So which ones are we going to start with? Which calls are we going to route first? Which ones are we going to introduce kind of some degree of self-service with first? And then when you've done that, you've then got the incremental improvement of the models on top of it. So it's very difficult to have that kind of big bang approach. Yet lots of organizational cultures work in that way. So I wonder whether you might share a little bit around how M&S and the culture and from your involvement in the project, was that kind of incremental approach, did it take some kind of convincing, or was it has M&S already got that kind of incremental
No, I
culture?
mean, yeah, I mean, MS in terms of sort of, I guess our product teams, we have that in terms of an agile methodology anyway. I think, even outside of, conversational AI, I think M&S has a general culture with a test and learn principle, and that's what we try and do. Part of that, I think, comes from the sort of M&S as a company in terms of, we've always got customer in the front of our minds when we're doing this type of stuff. So there is a little bit of a fear sometimes then to, this is such a big change for customers, especially, with the nature of, M&S as customers, historically, maybe they had a, the slightly older demographic than, sort of your more, like your sort of your new e-commerce retailers in the market who perhaps have a younger demographic. So I think there's always that care aspect in terms of we want to go carefully with this type of stuff. Let's do it at a smaller scale first of all, and grow from there once we start seeing what sort of response we're getting. So one of the measures that we actually had at the start was, and one of the things we were worried about would people actually willingly interact with the bot. So interestingly enough, that was one of the things that we had at the start was what percentage of people just didn't say anything when we asked them the question. And then we then sort of, initially we went, okay, well, if they've not said anything, we'll just send you straight through to a colleague. Fine. And then over time, gradually, we introduce a follow-up question to sort of go, sorry, didn't hear that. Could you tell us why you're calling today? And then, we got an incremental, increase in people who then were willing to interact with the service. And then again, over time, we then go, and I think we started at sort of like 30% of people just didn't say anything. But what is interesting is over time, as people get used to it, because obviously you can see the same, we've got a lot of people who ring us, once a week, customers wise. You see more and more people then, getting used to it. One of the interesting things we saw was that you ask the question, especially when you first make the change and the first time a customer encounters this new experience, you get a lot of people hanging up. And then what we noticed was that they'd ring back a few minutes later and then they'd say something. And I think what it was that people they weren't expecting it. They didn't actually know what to say. And then they'd sort of go away, have a bit of a think about what they were going to say and then ring back. And then they were very articulate. They were quite articulate. And it's interesting as well. Some people complete opposite that. And then we were getting sort of a couple of paragraphs of, there was one I remember particularly where we got a story of why they were. So they said, "Oh, I went into a store, I bought this jacket, but I got the jacket home. It still had its tag on, and I just want to know, And that was, we had to sort of then, because what we're interested in, and that makes it really difficult for CAI because it's got, oh goodness, what's going on here? There's all sorts of things that this particular caller is talking about. But people do learn how to use the technology over time as well. So that was quite interesting. But I think that I couldn't imagine M&S doing something like this as a big bang approach because it's too risky. And we can move quite quickly once we've got a little bit of information. It's sort of, let's learn a little bit, see what we find out, make a change, and we can add new functionality in quite quickly as we move along the journey. But we got our first intent model after the intent capture. We had an intent model within 4 weeks. Once we started with this sort of low number of stores, we had that intent model. And it was live. It wasn't routing, but we were able to start measuring its quality, how good it was. And we actually started routing, I think, within a couple of months. And then over time, then it's sort of then grown and grown and grown and grown. But we've sort of, where we're at now is sort of now we need more support from, your traditional development teams, because to get the full value now, we need to start integrating with APIs for better order tracking, for amending orders, for stuff like that. The stuff that where you've got to do it's not just about surfacing some information, it's actually about linking it to you as an individual.
Yeah, definitely. How long did you do that initial data capture piece for?
4 weeks.
All right, so you had the 4 weeks of initial data capture plus 4 weeks of building an intent model, plus a period of time where you were just basically running the intent model, but
Yeah,
not escalating, just checking its accuracy
yeah,
and improving it and stuff like that. And then eventually you rolled out the automated acting
yeah.
on the intents, basically.
The whole project, to sort of get it to its initial business case, met the business case, was 6 months.
Yeah.
We moved pretty quickly in that first sort of month or two, where we'd started to route, at the end of month 2. And that was across the entire store estate. And one of the other interesting things is that although the business case was only built for store calls initially, one of the interesting things is we then pretty quickly started to then leverage the same technology for calls to our contact centers as well. So from the e-commerce site, all the numbers that come off the e-commerce site, we then started to leverage, taking the same approach we'd use for stores. Interestingly enough, totally different contact reasons that we get when someone's trying to ring a store versus someone who's trying to. You get some of the same, but we had to build, a slightly different intent model at first. So we had 2 intent models. We had a store one and a what we referred to as a contact center one. And then over time, we've merged those into a single intent model where we leverage things we know about the call to sort of infer, what is, which intent it's most likely to be, depending on where you're calling from.
Interesting. So how is it performing? You mentioned there, you obviously put together the business case, went through the whole process. Inevitably, it's a living, breathing thing now that's been implemented, and maybe we'll get on to the next steps around the API access and integrations and stuff like that. But what were the results essentially on against the business case, like
Yeah,
percentage
so
of calls
if you
it's
look at
handling, that kind of stuff?
yeah, so if you look at the store business case, I think our sort of self-service call servicing objective wasn't massively ambitious. We were sort of looking at sort of 10% of calls that we were trying to get in there. The primary use case was because we accurately route the caller. And that was achieved, at the end, really, quite soon in the project, really. So we were, as I say, we were getting sort of that intent utterance accuracy, up to the high 80s by the end of sort of 2 or 3 months in the intents that we had. And then that was pretty much the objectives achieved for the store piece. Now obviously then we you say it's a living, breathing thing. We then moved into the contact center piece, which was a different thing we were trying to achieve. That was sort of more focused on, accuracy of routing. One of the interesting things is that traditional DTMF IVRs, which everyone who works in telephony and contact centers would be familiar with. We had across our lines, we had a number of DTMF IVRs. You ring this number, you get 6 options, choose an option, you route off the back of that. One thing that really brought home was that how poor traditional IVRs are actually at doing what they're trying to do, which is trying to sort of go, you're trying to do that, why is this person calling, and getting them to the right place. So we went, for example, we had several, had 2 or 3 IVRs, each with, 3 to 6 options. Depending on, were you calling about furniture? Was it about a store? Was it about, e-commerce type activity? When we did our model, we then went from, that number of options to 160 different intents. And that just sort of then gets it across as to how, it's nearly impossible to build a DTMF IVR that will cater for all of those scenarios that their customer has got in their head when they ring you. And everyone will be used to this in terms of when you get an IVR, you've got your intent, what you're trying to do in your head. And what you're trying to do is you're listening to the options on the IVR. And this is the best case scenario. Some people just click one and take their chances. You're listening to the options and you're going, does what I'm trying to do match option 1 better, or does it match option 3 better? So that's sort of my coping mechanism, but it just brings home the fact that how really inefficient they are at doing this type of thing. If you look at all your contact reasons and then go, how do you build an IVR for all those contact reasons, without completely overloading someone with, huge messages, huge cognitive load that they're just, it's just not going to serve the purpose.
Yeah, and that's the value of conversational interfaces in general, to be honest, because you could argue that a website is the same thing. You've only got so much screen real estate. You can only have so many menu items before people kind of get overwhelmed or whatever. Then the challenge is, how do you then deal with the breadth of language? And I think that there's a lot of companies that are a little bit afraid of that because they think it's a really big challenge. Like, how are we going to try and understand everything that someone could possibly say? But when you think about it, though, as a business, how could you not go through that exercise? Because you will have insights now on what your customers are actually talking to you about, what their actual real needs are, and you'll have categorized and quantified those. Whereas other companies that haven't gone down this path haven't. They just think that a web click on a menu item is a signifier of interest and intent, when it's not really, because you're relying on the label, what the label's called, and the whether that's translated into the mind of the user. So it's the challenge seems big, but it's almost like well, I'm bound to say this because I'm hugely biased, but it almost seems like an inevitable challenge that has to be gone through. Does it not?
Yeah, I mean, and as well, and that's just talking about getting the customer to the best place to actually answer that question. So even if you're not trying to automate anything, that's a huge challenge for contact centers anyway, be it in, voice has some additional challenges with cognitive load versus a website, in terms of time and stuff like that. But it's a challenge anywhere. And that's even before you then start thinking about how do I then look at opportunities to automate these contacts? Because you cannot automate a contact until you've understood what it is the customer is actually trying to achieve. And you cannot do that in the voice channel. Yeah, website slightly different, but you are, again, as you say, you're reliant upon a person looking at all the information that's available there and making the right judgment based upon the information you're giving them there on the screen. And conversational interfaces are just better at getting to the heart of the problem.
Yeah, definitely. In order to do that automation, understanding the front end is one thing. Understanding what someone's talking about and what their query is, and understanding and being able to classify that intent is one thing. The other thing is being able to have the infrastructure and the capabilities to be able to facilitate that automated transaction. You kind of alluded to this earlier on around, the next step being working more closely with the developers and all that kind of stuff. How much of that, or I wonder whether you can shed light on the current situation at M&S and any kind of advice you would have on companies approaching that automation stage and the importance of having your kind of house in order when it comes to those API availability and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it depends on your organization. M&S being around for so long, we suffer from what a lot of companies suffer from, as in we've got a lot of disparate systems that hold all this information. And part of there's a lot of work within M&S going on at the moment where we're trying to bring everything together in a single place, where we can sort of this is the centralized view of all this information about customers to sort of then, that we can then start plugging stuff interfacing into to get that really valuable information that you need if you're really going to crack automation. And you've got to have those teams in place, and structurally you've got to be set up in the right way where we feel that the as an operation in the contact center, we're the best play. We're here to produce the problem statements and provide the data to sort of go, this is our top reason for contact. This is where we're trying to get to, and then taking that problem to the development teams and sort of then going, okay, well, this is the information we need in order to then automate this journey. And that's where it becomes a lot more collaborative, because the way that we're set up, that we've set up our teams in M&S, is we've sort of made a conscious decision that the people who administer, tune, monitor the accuracy of, monitor the quality of, they're all, I guess you'd call domain experts, as in they're from the customer side of things, if you see what I mean. They've all got huge breadth of knowledge in terms of how M&S operates as a business. They've all come from the customer side of the operation. So at some point, they've all been involved in some shape or form with handling customer interactions themselves. And we feel that those are the right people to be managing the experience, monitoring the experience, but they're not developers, they don't code. And to be able to really get the full value, it's a matter of sort of pairing those people up with the people who can do the integrations, who can build the webhooks and the plugins and the integrations to where that information is held, and then build interfaces then that they can leverage to then really start to use those conversational journeys and get access to that information, and then build the journey out based upon letting the techies do what the techies are good at, and letting our teams do what we're good at, which is the customer journey itself.
Interesting. You mentioned that before, autopilot and Dialogflow. And you mentioned that when you began, it was Dialogflow ES, presumably before they'd released CX. Wondering whether, I've only got a couple of minutes left, but I'm wondering whether you can walk us through some of those processes and tools that you might use from that kind of like management, maintenance, AI ops kind of perspectives, or whether there's any learnings that you might have to share on that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. So where we feel we've still got tons of stuff we want to do, and by no means we're perfect in this. So I think because we sort of took the decision to teach customer-facing people the technical, the tools, that then means that you have to invest in teaching those people about conversation design, teaching those people about AI training, teaching those people. It's not just about learning how to use the tool; it's those skills that come along with those tools. So we still use Dialogflow ES. CX is, we feel as if that's a tool set that we will need to get us to where we're trying to go to and on our journey. And partly because of that, you've got that ability to really closely tune those intents and journeys. You've got, it comes with quite a lot of out of the box analytics stuff to sort of really understand, where are, we was talking about the website before, but where are the pain points in the journey? Where are we seeing, ambiguity in conversations? Where are people dropping out into a default intent? What was their journey they took prior to that? And it gives us sort of that further level of control. We've tried to build, by plugging into the raw data, we've tried to build the capability using tools such as Power BI to sort of provide us that sort of view of the journey, and then for the team to then drill into where the journey's maybe not going along. But the CX type product comes with a lot of that nowadays, comes with that. So that's where we feel as if that will be advantageous for us. The other thing that I think we were talking about before the call was, at the moment we don't have a consistent voice talent within our journey. So we've got a mix of I guess branded static messaging combined with TTS voices. And we feel as if, that's another area we want to develop into, so we can give a consistent voice, whether it's a static message that we're giving you, when you've left the dialogue flow part and the Twilio part of the journey, and you've come into the more generic contact center journeys. We want to make that journey a bit more consistent in that respect now as well. That's one of the things that we're quite keen on investigating now within, what's available in the market, and sort of move, to sort of do stuff around that. And then looking across all our channels, our chat, and our voice bot, to sort of go, well, what is the persona we're presenting? That's one of the things that we didn't think enough about at the start, to sort of go, what's the identity of the M&S bot? What are we trying to portray about this? Just as we try, our colleagues are all, we invest a lot of time about, what M&S is about, what are the values that are valuable to us. We think there's an opportunity around in our automated channel to sort of, do that. I think a lot of companies sort of are really good at that. You've got your Domino, you've got Dom from Domino's, who's very, very, they've got that brand right within their particular conversational AI channels. That's where we feel that, we want to be doing a lot more work in that area.
Yeah, definitely. It can definitely help. I mean, it can help increase, improve the engagement and stuff like that. It can help make it a bit, more memorable, and debating the level of personification that a different use case requires is quite interesting. Where I'm really keen to see things head is, it's the same as an actual live agent. You don't get the same personality every time you call, and you don't always get different conversations require a different approach as well. And so at the moment, I think most organizations, they'll do a personality design. I would argue most of them kind of do it a bit too high level, which is like this. Her name's Sandra. She comes from California, and her dad was a doctor, and all that kind of stuff. Whereas there's some really good frameworks out there from, like so Rebecca Evanhoe and Diana Diebel and stuff, which really concentrates it around the specific use case, which enables you to do things like have a personalized voice, but flex the persona based on the type of use case. So if someone's calling about a return or to make a complaint, the persona might behave slightly differently to if someone's calling to make a sale or whatever, That's where I'm kind of really keen to see it develop, and beyond that kind of initial persona into a persona that is able to flex to the use case. And in future, we're probably a bit, the technology exists now to do this, but I think we're a bit behind as far as the adoption of this. But hooking up things like sentiment analysis, and even things like there's a whole bunch of different things you can do with conversational intelligence to understand the conversational speaking style of the caller, and pairing that with an agent that matches that conversational speaking style and can respond based on the sentiment as well. Like, I always say that this stuff is about to get more complex before it gets simpler. But definitely there's some big value to be had in that, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're looking at now in terms of conversational AI in general. We're sort of looking, okay, well, we've had a lot of focus around, customer conversations now. How can we start to leverage that to benefit the colleagues who are, talking to customers in all our channels? Some very interesting stuff around, what anyone using Microsoft Teams, where obviously predictive texting, has been around for ages, but there's a lot of stuff in that area at the moment in terms of how can we, because we are understanding what's going on in the conversation, and that might be a live chat, a live voice conversation, or an email. Can we then leverage that to help the colleague better, more efficiently answer the question, or more help them find the right answer to the customer question in the first place? To sort of, where, for example, taking what we know about the conversation with the automated platform and passing the key bits of information. If we have to escalate, we pass in the key bits of information we've learned about that conversation to the colleague. And for example, we know it's about where's my order, and we know it's about this order, but proactively offering guidance to the colleague about what they need to then do to resolve that for the customer, and sort of really sort of trying to make the conversation more efficient, but also try and not make as many errors. Can we help? Microsoft Viva, if anyone's used that, is really interesting, that it's reading conversations that you're having via email, and it's reminding you that you've said you were going to do something for this person, and have you done it or not? And that's really fascinating in terms of how we then start to leverage that for our customer facing colleagues, because at the end of the day, we're always going to have customer facing colleagues. They're always going to be there.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And there's such an untapped area there for the agent assist side of things, which reminds me of the webinar that we're running with Core AI. For those of you tuning in, we're running a webinar with Core AI next week. It is on the, I believe it's the 6th of May. I'll double check that because I don't want to be lying to you.
5th, I think.
5th, there you go, 5th of May. Thank you, Steve. You've been paying more attention than I have. 5th of May, we're going to be talking all about agent assist technologies and how that can help improve agent productivity and customer experience. Please do check that out. VUX.world/better-together if you are listening on the podcast. Steve, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for tuning in. I know we had some questions coming through here in the chat, which we haven't had time to get to. So apologies, Guillaume. Apologies, Yakov, for not managing to get there. But I think we were in flow during that conversation. It was a bit difficult to break stride. But thank you, Stephen, so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
No, thanks for the opportunity.
No probs, no probs. And everybody else, we are back again next week. As always, next week we have the webinar with Core AI, as I mentioned. And on Tuesday, we're talking to Brad Cleveland, who is an independent consultant working in the contact center space. We're going to be talking about all of the contact center and CX trends that are occurring in 2022 so far, including, obviously, conversational AI. So we're looking forward to seeing you again there. Without further ado, Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll see you all